Another month without a job, huh? Maybe you should apply at that cafe down the street, Vivian. At least they give you a cute apron. Andrew's voice was full of smug amusement as he raised his glass. Laughter erupted around the table. 5 men in tailored suits leaned back, their crystal glasses catching the rooftop lights like trophies of power. I held my wine quietly, the stem pressing into my palm, my smile frozen, fragile, hollow. I didn't speak. I lowered my gaze, letting my hair fall just enough to shield my expression. They couldn't see my eyes, but if they had, they might have noticed I wasn't humiliated. I was calculating. We were 26 floors above the streets of Chicago, the city sparkling beneath us like a false promise. The rooftop of the Waldorf Astoria was alive with laughter and clinking glass, but every sound felt like a blade pressed against my skin. And none of them, especially not Andrew, had any idea who they were really mocking. I sipped the wine slowly, letting the bitterness sit on my tongue. A reminder to stay quiet, to stay patient. They thought I was just a failed woman, a lucky wife who landed a generous husband, someone to pity, or worse, to laugh at. Vivian, one of Andrew's colleagues, chimed in. Andrew should start a charity for wives who just can't seem to get hired. Poor thing. Andrew chuckled. Oh, come on, she's working, doing in-depth research on Netflix's rom-coms. More laughter, louder this time. I didn't flinch. I'd trained myself not to. Years of this, being the punchline, the forgotten one at events, the ghost of a woman no one took seriously. But once I was loved by this man. Once he looked at me like I was his partner. Now I was just a decorative shame, a convenient narrative, a quiet shadow behind his bright, boastful light. There were days I questioned myself. Was I not enough? Not strong enough, not smart enough? But deep down I knew who I was. I built an empire from the ground up, a tech security powerhouse trusted by the largest corporations in the country, a company worth 9 figures, and the very same company that signed the checks for every man sitting at this table. They didn't know. Not Andrew. Not his arrogant inner circle. Not a single one of them suspected that the woman they mocked was the founder and CEO of Colworth Systems. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to storm out. Revenge is best served, not just cold, but perfectly timed. And time was the one thing I had mastered. Tomorrow morning, I would walk into that boardroom, not as a joke, not as Andrew's unemployed wife, but as the woman who owned their titles, their futures, and their fate. And I would take it all back. But for tonight, I let them enjoy their illusions. I placed my wine glass gently on the table, leaned back in my chair, and smiled to myself. Laugh while you can, I whispered under my breath, because tomorrow none of you will be laughing. Andrew Cole was not always this cruel, at least not in the beginning. We met 10 years ago at a cybersecurity conference in San Francisco. I wasn't looking for anyone. I had just landed my second round of funding for Colworth Systems and was too consumed by code and contracts to care about romance. But Andrew was charming, warm, attentive, just the right mix of confident and careful. He saw me standing alone with a drink and asked about the book I was reading. Not my outfit, not my hair. That mattered to me. He listened when I spoke, asked questions, laughed at all the right moments without sounding performative. He made me feel like I could exhale, like I didn't have to perform to be seen. When we started dating, I didn't tell him who I really was. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I wanted to believe love could exist without power attached. So I told him I was a freelance financial consultant, struggling to build a client base. I lived in a modest apartment in Lincoln Park, drove a pre-owned Civic, wore clean but forgettable clothes. It was the version of me no one expected anything from, and Andrew embraced it. At first, he was supportive. He made breakfast on Sundays, edited my fake client presentations, even encouraged me when I pretended to be rejected from jobs I never applied for. I remember thinking, Maybe this is real. Maybe I could just be Vivian, not Ms. Colworth. But then things shifted. Slowly, subtly. The compliments faded. The gentle encouragement turned into passive-aggressive jokes. "Still working on that resume," he'd say while brushing his teeth. "You know, not everyone's cut out for the corporate world." He stopped asking about my day, stopped pretending to believe in me, and that's when I realized something painful. Andrew didn't fall out of love with me. He fell out of love with the version of me he thought he could rescue. He needed to be the hero, the provider, the one who saved the woman with no power. The moment he felt I was no longer grateful, I became disposable. By the 3rd year of our marriage, Andrew had fully reinvented himself. New wardrobe, new haircut, expensive watch, and a sudden obsession with boardrooms and buzzwords. He made sure everyone knew he was a self-made success, rising through Colworth's ranks on sheer brilliance alone. He loved the sound of his title, Executive Vice President. I had given him that title. I had approved his promotion, and he never once asked how he got there, because in his mind it was all him. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at himself in the mirror, adjusting his tie, murmuring things like, "They need me in the room," or "I lead this company." And every time, I'd smile politely, pour his coffee, and wonder how long it would take before he crashed. I never corrected him, never hinted at the truth, because the longer he underestimated me, the harder the fall would be. I kept my power in shadows, built layers of protection, alternate names on documents, a network of silent partners, legal shields that placed me in control without ever being seen. And all the while, Andrew thought he was the star, thought he was the one steering the ship. He didn't know he was standing on a stage I built, a stage that was now cracking beneath his feet. People think revenge starts with anger. Mine didn't. It started with grief. The grief of realizing the man I once loved only the version of me that made him feel powerful. And once I outgrew that version, he had no use for me. That's when I stopped trying to win him back and started building the world he'd never survive in. The world I would reveal tomorrow morning. It began with a whisper, not in a boardroom, but in the hallway outside one. A young intern named Carla, barely 22, bright as daylight and shaking like a leaf, was crying near the elevator banks. No one stopped, except me. She didn't recognize me, of course. No one did. That was the point. I asked if she was all right. She said nothing at first, just wiped her tears and tried to smile. Then I gently said, "You don't have to pretend." And that's when she broke. They had cornered her after a product demo, told her she wasn't team material, that her blouse was too distracting for a workplace filled with serious men. I didn't need to ask who they were. I already knew. That was the moment the grief I had been carrying turned into steel. It wasn't just about Andrew anymore. It was about every woman in that building who was told to smile while being stepped on. It was about every brilliant idea dismissed, every voice silenced. So I stopped waiting, and I started building. I hired the best private investigators money could buy. Former federal agents, data recovery specialists, forensic accountants. They had one job, watch, document, gather. I gave them access to Colworth's internal systems I had designed, encrypted, and controlled. Every email, every Slack message, every calendar invite and late-night business dinner receipt came through me. Within 2 months, I had enough to make the Securities and Exchange Commission raise an eyebrow. But I wasn't done. I wanted to understand how deep the rot went, so I created a new identity, not as Vivian Cole, not as the CEO, but as Sophie Rayner, an unemployed data analyst, mediocre on paper, no connections, no glow, just another name in a sea of applications. And Colworth Systems, my company, welcomed me in the same way it always did women like me, with arrogance, with disdain, with a smirk. The interview was conducted by three of Andrew's closest lieutenants. I knew their names. I'd once approved their bonuses. They didn't even pretend to read my resume. One looked me up and down with a smirk. "You've been unemployed for how long?" he asked. "Almost a year," I replied softly, playing the part. Another one chuckled. "Yikes. Job market's rough out there, huh?" I could see the contempt dripping from their posture. I could feel the way they mentally discarded me. To them, I was invisible, and that's exactly what I needed to be. One of them started texting mid-interview. A minute later, all three phones buzzed at once. I didn't need to look. Andrew was laughing somewhere. He knew I was there, and like always, he thought I was harmless. I walked out of the room with no callback, no offer, no "we'll be in touch." But I had something better. I had a front row seat to their rot, how they dismissed talent, how they reinforced their boys' club, how they ran this company like a fraternity with a $1 trillion client list. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just opened my laptop and started labeling files. Financial fraud, workplace harassment, insider trading, suppressed HR complaints, sexist internal memos, corruption contracts. It wasn't a revenge file. It was a reckoning folder. I wasn't just going to fire them. I was going to expose them. Not for me, but for every single person they crushed under their Gucci loafers. The storm was coming, and this time, I would be the one holding the thunder. The interview lasted exactly 15 minutes, but it taught me everything I needed to know. I walked into that glass-walled conference room on the 7th floor of my own building, wearing a suit I bought at a second-hand store. The hem was slightly frayed. The shoes were scuffed. I had tied my hair back in a way that said, "Trying too hard to look professional." I looked unremarkable. That was the point. Three men were already seated, sipping coffee from branded Colworth mugs. I knew them well. I had seen the invoices that approved their obscene bonuses. I had seen the vacation photos they posted from company retreats that excluded women. They didn't look up when I entered. "Take a seat," one of them said, scrolling on his phone. I sat, smiled politely, waited. Another man flipped through my printed resume like it was a napkin. "You've been unemployed for a while," he said flatly. "Yes," I replied. "Since my last contract ended, I've been looking for something long-term." He raised an eyebrow. "Any reason nothing's worked out?" I paused. The real me, the Vivian who signed their paychecks, wanted to answer with sharp clarity. But Sophie Rayner, she stayed small. "Just bad luck, I guess." He nodded, not kindly, just knowingly, the kind of nod you give someone you've already dismissed. The questions that followed weren't questions. They were tests. Why should we pick you over someone younger? What makes you think you'd fit into a fast-paced team? Are you comfortable taking direction, especially from male colleagues? They didn't say male out loud, but it was there, dripping between the lines like oil. Halfway through the interview, one of them pulled out his phone. He was texting. I didn't need to see the screen. I knew the rhythm of Andrew's messages. 2 minutes later, all three phones buzzed. One of them snorted. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered under his breath. Another chuckled. "She's got spirit, though. I'll give her that." No one explained what was funny. No one needed to. I sat there still, not hurt, not embarrassed, just observing. These were the men running my company. These were the decision makers. And this was the culture they had built. I answered their questions calmly, softly, without confrontation, because I wasn't there to be hired. I was there to remember. When it ended, they didn't shake my hand, didn't offer a smile or a thank you. One of them just said, "We'll be in touch." And I nodded, knowing they never would be. I walked out through the hallway of my own building. Walls I had designed, floor tiles I had approved, and no one recognized me. That anonymity should have hurt, but instead it freed me. Back in my apartment, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and moved the interview folder into a new subdirectory. Final layer. Because now I had everything. Proof of corruption. Proof of abuse. Proof of a culture designed to humiliate, discard, and silence. And now I had seen it from the inside. Tomorrow morning, they would walk into a boardroom, thinking it was business as usual. They would sip their coffee, talk over each other, crack a few jokes. And then they would see me. Not Sophie. Not Andrew's wife. Not the unemployed woman at the dinner table. But me, Vivian Cole, founder, CEO, and the storm they never saw coming. The morning sun hadn't even warmed the sidewalks when I stepped into the lobby of Colworth Systems. But already there was tension in the air. Executives rushed past, phones in hand, murmuring about contracts, forecasts, end of quarter pressure. They nodded at me with polite indifference, none of them recognizing the woman behind the tinted glasses and structured navy coat. That was fine. Let them underestimate me for a few more minutes. I took the elevator to the top floor, the executive level. Normally, I entered through the back, using a private corridor meant for confidential meetings. But not today. Today, I wanted every single person in that building to see me walk in through the front. The boardroom was already filling up when I arrived. Long mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a sweeping view of downtown Chicago. The company's elite sat around it, shareholders, executives, senior advisors. At the head of the table, I took my seat. No fanfare, no announcement, just quiet authority. Behind me, a massive LED screen displayed nothing but the company logo. For now. The door opened again. Andrew walked in, followed by his 4 closest friends, all grinning, laughing about some joke I didn't care to hear. They hadn't seen me yet. Not until Andrew turned to take his seat at the other end of the table, and froze. His smile faltered. Eyes narrowed. He looked around the room, confused, searching for context that didn't exist. "Vivian," he asked, laughing awkwardly, "what are you doing here?" I placed my hand gently on the thick folder in front of me. My voice was calm, clear. "Sit down, Andrew. You and your friends will want to hear what I have to say." He hesitated, then obeyed. The others followed, suddenly silent. "Before we begin," I continued, looking him directly in the eye, "I'd like to reintroduce myself." I stood. "My name is Vivian Cole. I am the founder and CEO of Colworth Systems." The room froze. No one breathed. Shock rippled across every face. Andrew's skin drained of color. One of the other men whispered, "You're lying," but I didn't need to argue. I clicked the remote. The logo on the screen vanished. In its place, documents, spreadsheets, emails, recordings, each one time-stamped, verified, irrefutable. "For the past 2 years," I said evenly, "you've stolen from this company. You've abused your power. You've manipulated contracts, leaked confidential data, and fostered a culture of humiliation and exploitation." No one spoke. No one blinked. Every single transaction has been documented. Every dinner billed to the company card. Every private message you thought would stay private is on this screen. I turned to Andrew. "And no, I haven't forgotten the way you mocked me in front of your friends. You laughed because you thought I was beneath you, but you only stood so tall because I let you." The room was silent, and then I signed the first paper. Termination. Andrew Cole. Then the next, and the next. Each page slid down the table like a guillotine. "You're all fired. Effective immediately." Andrew shot to his feet. "You can't do this," he yelled. "I'm the vice president. You were," I cut in cold as glass. "You never built this company. You were just lucky enough to ride the wave until it drowned you." The doors opened. Security entered. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just prepared. Andrew turned to his colleagues. But no one moved. No one defended him. They kept their eyes down. He was alone. You have 10 minutes to collect your things, I said. Your access has already been revoked. Leave quietly before I make this even uglier. He stared at me and saw nothing left to fight. One by one, they were escorted out, not as executives, not as power players, but as disgraced men who never saw it coming. And I didn't even watch them go. I had better things to do, starting with rebuilding the empire they tried to poison. By the time I returned to my office on the 40th floor, the news had already spread. Someone had leaked footage, probably one of the shareholders, or maybe someone in legal. The clip was only 47 seconds long, but it was enough. Andrew's face, frozen mid-outburst. My voice, sharp and unwavering. You were just lucky enough to ride the wave until it drowned you. The video went viral before lunchtime. Financial blogs ran with it first. CEO shocks boardroom with mass termination. Colworth Systems purges top brass after secret corruption probe. Then came the business networks. Then Reddit. Then TikTok. Someone even started a trend. Hashtag the Vivian Effect. But I didn't care about hashtags. I wasn't chasing headlines. This wasn't revenge porn. It was justice finally breathing. Within hours, recruitment firms began withdrawing offers made to Andrew's friends. 3 of their wives filed for divorce, to the very same day. One of them, reportedly, had no idea her husband had been funneling company funds into a secret offshore account. And Andrew, the man who once wore a $12,000 watch to family dinners, the man who once referred to me as his philanthropic project, he had become a ghost. An old colleague ran into him weeks later at a small electronics chain in the suburbs. He was working the floor, folding boxes, scanning barcodes. No suit, no Rolex, no arrogance. She told me his face looked hollow. His smile had collapsed into something that looked more like apology than pride. I didn't need to see it to believe it. I didn't need to gloat. He had already destroyed himself. All I did was let the truth be seen. But my focus wasn't on Andrew anymore. It was on the people who were still here, the ones who had stayed silent, not out of cowardice, but because no one ever listened. The interns who tiptoed through toxic meetings. The engineers passed over for promotions because they didn't play golf. The HR managers who cried in parking garages because their reports got lost. They were the reason I came back, not just to remove the rot, but to make sure it never returned. That afternoon, I called for a company-wide meeting. Thousands of employees joined the live stream. No makeup, no script, no PR prep, just me standing in front of them. I know many of you are confused, I began, but what happened today wasn't chaos. It was correction. And then I told them everything. The investigations, the corruption, the cover-ups, the silent hands that guided so many good people out the door. I ended with this. We're not going back to what Colworth was. We're building something new. And this time, no one will be left behind. After the meeting ended, I stayed in the room alone. Dozens of messages poured in. Some were thank yous, some were apologies, but the one that stuck with me came from Lisa. Lisa Hull, a brilliant software engineer forced out 3 years ago because she refused to attend Andrew's Friday networking parties. Her message was short. Do you really want me back? I replied instantly. I don't just want you back. I want you to lead our AI division. 3 days later, Lisa walked back into Colworth Systems, and for the first time in years, the hallways didn't feel heavy. They felt alive. Smiles returned. Doors stayed open. Ideas were shared, not stolen. It wasn't just a company anymore. It was hers, theirs, ours. And I finally felt like I belonged too. Rebuilding a company isn't about replacing people. It's about rewriting the story they were forced to live in. That's where I started. The first thing I did was clean house. Not just the executives, but everyone who had enabled them. HR directors who buried complaints. team leads who laughed off harassment as office banter, managers who punished women for saying no. They were gone. Not with cruelty, with clarity, because this wasn't vengeance. It was accountability. Then I opened every channel that had once been sealed shut, an anonymous reporting system, a direct whistleblower hotline, unfiltered, unanswered by layers of bureaucracy, a promise written in plain English. You will be heard. And for the first time they were. I remember the first week after the purge, walking through the halls and catching conversations I hadn't heard in years. Laughter, not the sharp kind, cutting, cruel, exclusionary, but the soft, startled kind that bubbles up when people realize it's safe to breathe again. Within a month, we brought back 23 former employees, women, minorities, people with voices that had once been too loud, too emotional, too much. Now they were exactly enough. I launched a mentorship program, not just for optics, for action. Each senior leader was paired with a new hire, many of them women in tech, first-generation graduates, or returning professionals who had left toxic workplaces. They weren't told to prove themselves. They were told, you belong here. Let's build together. Lisa, the engineer Andrew had once pushed out for not being a team player, was now leading our AI research division. Her team? Handpicked from talent previously overlooked. Within weeks, they had already developed a prototype that stunned one of our largest clients. And the best part? No one in that room tried to take credit for it. We implemented leadership ethics training, not a once-a-year seminar, but real, hard conversations. What power means, what trust looks like, what silence can cost. I wasn't interested in empty apologies. I wanted transformation. And slowly, I saw it happening. People began speaking up. Meetings started ending with consensus, not resentment. Managers began asking, "How are you doing?" And meaning it. The air changed. The energy changed. We weren't perfect, but we were trying, and that mattered. One afternoon, I walked past the break room and stopped in the doorway. Lisa and her team were gathered around a whiteboard, arguing playfully about a new interface design. Someone made a joke. They all burst out laughing, and no one looked over their shoulder. No one flinched. No one whispered. It hit me, right then. This was the company I had always dreamed of building. Not polished, but proud. Not afraid, but free. I didn't say anything. I just watched and smiled, because this wasn't my victory. This was ours. And for the first time in years, I no longer felt like I was rebuilding something broken. I was finally building something whole. I didn't hear from Andrew after that day. Not a call, not a letter, not even one of those passive-aggressive texts he used to send that read like apologies but never said sorry. He disappeared, and I didn't go looking. But news has a way of finding you when you've made peace with silence. 3 months after the purge, an old friend from Stanford texted me, "Saw your ex at Best Tech in Schaumburg, selling printers." I stared at the message for a moment, rereading the words. Not because I didn't believe them, but because a small part of me still remembered the man who once held my hand in the rain before ego hollowed him out. She sent a photo. I didn't ask for it, but she did anyway. Andrew stood behind a counter in a red polo shirt and khakis, staring down at a barcode scanner. There was a smudge on his glasses. His shoulders slumped forward like the weight of his own choices had finally caught up to him. He wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. He was empty. The man who once laughed as he mocked me over steak and red wine now explained warranty policies to customers who barely looked up from their phones. There was no grand downfall, no scandalous tell-all, just slow erosion, the kind that strips you, layer by layer, until there's nothing left but the echo of who you used to be. I learned later that he had tried to sue Colworth for wrongful termination. He lost, of course. The evidence was airtight. His attorney dropped him halfway through. His name was scrubbed from every corporate archive. Articles that once praised his leadership acumen were quietly edited. He became what so many mediocre men become when the scaffolding of privilege collapses: forgettable. Someone once asked me if I felt sorry for him. I didn't. Pity implies that something tragic happened to him. But nothing happened to Andrew. Everything that came he built with his own hands. And when the walls fell in, he was holding the hammer. There's a kind of justice that doesn't need courtrooms. It comes in the form of silence, of irrelevance, of watching the world move on without you. He used to believe the world revolved around him. Now, even his shadow doesn't linger. I never responded to my friend's photo. I just looked at it once, then deleted it. There was nothing more to say, nothing more to feel, not even satisfaction, just closure. Because in the end, this story was never about Andrew. It was about the system that let him rise, and the woman who tore it down, piece by piece, smile by smile, silence by silence. And now it was done, not with fire, not with fury, but with truth, and the calm that follows it. There are days when I still wake up before the sun. Old habits die slowly, but I don't rush anymore. I pour my coffee slowly now. I open the windows. I let the light in. And sometimes I just sit in silence, not out of sadness, but because the war is over, and I won. Not the kind of victory people post about. Not champagne on rooftops or viral headlines. Those came and went. The real victory is quieter. It's walking through the halls of Colworth Systems and hearing laughter that doesn't shrink into silence when a man walks by. It's seeing women lead meetings without explaining their credentials 3 times. It's interns asking hard questions without fear of being labeled difficult. It's watching a culture change because someone finally said, "No more." I don't run every meeting now. I don't need to. I've built a team that doesn't just protect the mission, they embody it. Colworth is no longer my company. It's ours. And someday it will belong to people I'll never meet. And I'm okay with that, because I didn't just build a company. I built a place where people can belong without bending, where they can grow without shrinking. I mentor young women in tech now, not because they need my help. Most of them are far more brilliant than I ever was at their age. But because I want them to know you don't have to survive a man like Andrew to be powerful. You don't have to be broken first. You're allowed to thrive just because you're good. Every year now, we award a scholarship in the name of Carla, the intern who cried outside the elevator that day. She didn't stay at Colworth. She went back to school. Now she runs her own startup in San Diego. We still talk sometimes. She sends me photos of her dog. I send her articles I think she'll roll her eyes at. It's the kind of relationship I never had with my mentors. The kind built on honesty, not hierarchy. As for Andrew, he's just a name now, a memory that doesn't sting, a chapter that has been read, understood, and shelved. I don't hate him. I don't thank him. He was simply the spark. But I was the fire. People ask me sometimes if I'd do it all over again, if I'd lie about who I was, if I'd stay silent all those years. And the truth is, yes, because without that silence, I never would have heard what the world truly sounds like when you stop pretending. I built something that matters, not just for me, but for everyone who was ever told they weren't enough. And one day, when I'm no longer here, Colworth will still stand, not as a tech giant, but as a monument to the quiet power of women who refuse to stay small. This is not the end of my story, but it is the part one needed to tell. I was Vivian Cole, the woman they mocked, the one they underestimated, and this was the day they learned who I really was.